In our previous episode, we touched upon the meaning, nature, and purpose of law. In this episode, we will apply these concepts to the state and to the proper role of civil government. One's understanding of civil government's proper role, and thus the purpose of law, is fundamentally contingent on how one thinks about rights and authority, especially the source of rights and authority. If rights and authority are believed to come from any other source than God, then rights and authority are insecure. In order to develop a civil government that promotes and protects freedom, moral absolutes must exist. Without an ethical code from a divine source, right and wrong, that which is just and unjust, becomes relative. It changes with the times, it changes with the majority, or with the rise of new civil magistrates. Only a divine source of rights and authority, which establishes moral absolutes that apply to everyone, including government, allows mankind to pursue and achieve freedom. This biblical, pragmatic, and logical understanding of rights and authority means that civil government cannot have, does not have, absolute authority, that its purpose is limited. Thus, because the nature of law is to declare what is good and what is evil, its purpose must be to promote justice and restrain evil, which it can do only because there are moral absolutes. Although civil government has the authority to legislate, to make laws, because of the biblical understanding of rights and authority, it is not sovereign over all areas of life. It is limited in their legislative scope. And because the nature of man is inherently sinful and the nature of government is force, not all laws will be appropriate. Thus, we need to be able to discern when laws created by civil government are unjust. For instance, can the state steal? Would a law granting the civil government the right to some of your property be okay? Does making something legal make it valid or right? To help answer these questions, let's consider the story of Walter and John. There are two neighbors. One has a large, beautiful house with a swimming pool, a tennis court, fancy furniture, and extravagant art on the walls, not to mention the several cars in the garage. The other neighbor has a small house, no pool, no tennis court, plain furniture, no art, and only one car that constantly needs attention to keep it functioning. Eventually, the poor neighbor tires of seeing the wealthy neighbor have so much and he so little. So he walks over to the large, beautiful house and he knocks on the door. The owner of the house answers, "Yes, can I help you, John?" "Why, yes, you can. You can give me 30% of your monthly income once a month," says John. Upon hearing this demand, Walter slams the door in John's face. John turns around and goes back home. 1 month later, John returns again. He knocks on the door. Walter answers and is greeted with a gun in the face. "Where's the money you owe me?" says John. "I don't owe you any money," says Walter angrily. "This gun here says otherwise, pal. 30% or die," warns John. Walter decides it's not worth his life, so he gives John 30% of his monthly income. John eagerly takes it and then leaves. Since Walter does not want to be robbed once a month by this guy, he calls the police and has him arrested. However, John gets off on a technicality. Walter worries that John will be back, but John decides that it is not worth the risk to rob someone at gunpoint. Instead, John runs for public office. His platform declares that the gap between the rich and the poor is too large. Wealthier people, he shouts, should give to the less fortunate. This cry for equality earns John immense popularity from the lower-income citizens of the area. As a result, John wins election and is now responsible for legislation. His first piece of legislation asks for those that are wealthy to be taxed 30%, and that 30% going to the poor. The law passes. Now Walter must give up 30% of his income every month to John, and if he doesn't, he is the one breaking the law. The Walter and John story clearly shows us a few key lessons. First, the purpose of law, and by extension, the proper role of civil government, hinges on our understanding of rights and authority, as well as the nature of man and government. Second, a law cannot be considered right or just simply because it has the distinction of being a law. There are absolutes that apply not only to us as individuals, but also to collectives, to groups, including government. And third, justice can only exist if there are moral absolutes. To promote justice, one needs to know the difference between good and evil. The Walter and John story shows us that it is possible to use the law as an instrument of injustice. So, can the state steal? It can, but does it have the authority to steal? There are moral absolutes, so civil government is under God's law, and rights come from God, not government. So the clear and obvious answer is no. The civil government does not have the authority to steal. Because there is such a thing as an unjust law, that civil magistrates can immorally use the law as a weapon of injustice, we need to be able to discern if a law is just or unjust. The next episode will go through 5 standards that help us do that.